Have you ever felt like someone who passed away was still around you? Maybe you caught a familiar scent in a place it shouldn't have been. Or a song came on the radio at just the right moment, the one that reminds you of them. Maybe a sudden thought popped into your head that felt like it wasn't entirely your own. Moments like these often come quietly. We pause. We wonder, was that just my mind playing tricks on me? Or was it something more? Science tends to explain these things as part of the grieving process, as memory, nostalgia, or the brain's way of coping with loss. And sure, that's possible. But what if it's not just memory? What if it's the connection? Across time, cultures, and belief systems, there's one idea that keeps coming back. Death may not be the end. It might just be a change, a transition into a different state of being. And if that's true, then maybe the ones we've lost aren't really gone. Maybe they're closer than we think. In this video, we're going to explore that possibility. We'll dive into mysterious insights of Edgar-Cayce, the man some call the sleeping prophet, and the surprising ways cultures around the world have stayed connected to those who've passed on. Because sometimes, to understand the invisible, we need to look back to wisdom that never really died. From the pyramids of ancient Egypt to the incense-lit homes of modern China, one belief has stood the test of time. Death does not break the bond between the living and the dead. In ancient Egypt, tombs weren't just graves, they were portals. Kings and queens were buried with food, furniture, even pets, all carefully placed to support them in the afterlife. It wasn't just about honoring the dead. It was about helping them live on in another realm. In traditional Chinese culture, families burned joss paper, symbolic money and goods, to send to their ancestors in the spirit world. It's a powerful act of faith, not just in memory, but in presence. A belief that those who came before are still with us, watching, listening, even helping. And then there are the indigenous traditions, from the Americas to Africa to Australia, where ancestors are not just remembered, they're invited into rituals. They're part of the living community. They're called upon for guidance, protection, and wisdom. All of these practices, thousands of years apart, worlds apart, point to the same deep human intuition. The connection between the living and the dead continues. Even today, in modern, secular societies, that feeling hasn't gone away. People still report dreams where lost loved ones appear with messages of peace. Others describe unexplainable signs, a flickering light, a sudden chill, a meaningful coincidence that seem to arrive just when they're needed most. Sure, skeptics might dismiss all of this as grief in disguise. But when so many people, across so many times and places, report the same kinds of experiences, maybe we need to ask a different question. What if these moments aren't just memories? What if they're in contact? If you ever had a dream that felt more than a dream, one where a loved one who passed seemed real, present, even comforting, you're not alone. Stories like these are incredibly common. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes it's a symbol, like a butterfly, a bird, or a number that shows up at just the right moment. Or it's a sudden chill, a rush of emotion, or a sense that someone's in the room, even when you're alone. These experiences tend to show up not during ordinary moments, but in times of emotional intensity, during loss, during the transition, during deep personal transformation. What's striking is how universal this is. People across cultures, religions, and belief systems describe these moments in similar ways. And they almost always say the same thing. It didn't feel like imagination. So the question arises, are these just psychological defense mechanisms, the brain's way of protecting us from pain? Or are they glimpses of something greater? Are they signs that consciousness, who we are, might extend beyond the physical body? Modern science doesn't yet have a full answer, but the consistency of these stories, the emotional clarity people feel afterward, and the timing, often occurring when they're most needed, suggests that something real may be happening. And that something, is where the work of Edgar-Cayce becomes so intriguing. Edgar-Cayce wasn't a mystic in the traditional sense. He was a simple man from Kentucky, deeply religious, soft-spoken, and yet, when he entered a trance, something extraordinary happened. He accessed information that seemed to come from beyond this world. That's why people called him the sleeping prophet. Through thousands of recorded readings, Cayce spoke about health, reincarnation, the nature of the soul, and most fascinating of all, life after death. For Cayce, death wasn't an end. It was a shift, a change in vibrational frequency. The soul doesn't vanish. It simply transitions into another state of being, like stepping from one room into another. He described the afterlife not as one single place, but as a series of planes or realms. Each one offered opportunities for healing, reflection, and continued growth. In other words, our journey doesn't stop when the body does. The soul keeps evolving. Now here's the part that resonates deeply with many who have felt the presence of someone they loved. Cayce said that souls in the afterlife can and do reach out, but not to watch us in the way we might imagine, not like spirits spying on our daily routines. Instead, they're drawn by emotion, by love, by resonance. He believed that the departed feel our energy, especially during moments of deep grief, prayer, or spiritual awakening. That's when the veil thins. That's when presence becomes possible. In this view, contact with the dead isn't something spooky or strange. It's a continuation of a soul bond, a relationship that hasn't ended. It's just changed form. And maybe, if we learn to listen differently, we'll realize they've been speaking to us all along. Edgar-Cayce spoke often of different planes of existence, realms the soul moves through after physical death. These weren't vague spiritual metaphors. He described them in specific terms, as levels of consciousness, each with a different frequency, purpose, and form of experience. In his readings, the soul doesn't simply go somewhere after death. It continues evolving, learning, reflecting. It passes through stages of healing, just like we do after trauma or transition in life. And depending on the soul's growth, it resonates with a certain plane, a kind of spiritual gravity that pulls it to where it belongs. Now, to many, that might sound esoteric. But interestingly, modern physics has begun to entertain ideas that, without meaning to, start to echo Cayce's vision. In quantum mechanics, there's a principle called entanglement. Two particles, once connected, remain linked across time and space. Affect one, and the other responds instantly, even light years away. Could human consciousness work the same way? If we form deep emotional bond with others, could those connections persist even after death? Some researchers think so, and they point to powerful phenomena like terminal lucidity, moments where people with severe brain damage suddenly become clear-minded right before death, or near-death experiences, where people report vivid scenes, encounters, or messages during times when their bodies were clinically unresponsive. These cases challenge the traditional view that the brain creates consciousness. Instead, a growing number of scientists suggest the brain may be more like a receiver, tuning into a greater field of consciousness that exists independently of the body, just as Cayce proposed nearly a century ago. If that's true, then death isn't the end of awareness. It's a shift in channel. And maybe we're never fully disconnected from those who moved on, because we still share the same field. Across almost every spiritual tradition, one truth remains constant. Love does not end with death. In Buddhism, it's believed that the soul lingers after passing, often aware of the emotions left behind. It's not unusual for the departed to appear in dreams or to hover near places or people they loved, drawn not by duty, but by compassion. In Islam, the soul enters an intermediate realm, a place where it remains aware, especially during moment of prayer or remembrance. Loved ones who pray or speak to the deceased may, in fact, be heard, because the connection of love is still alive. Among many indigenous cultures, ancestors are not seen as gone. They are guardians, protectors, guides. They are part of everyday life. People don't just remember them. They consult them, invite them into rituals, honor them in ceremony. The relationship continues, just in a different form. And once again, Edgar-Cayce's teachings align. He believed the soul doesn't remain tethered to the living through curiosity or observation, but through emotion. The deeper the love, the stronger the resonance. It's not about ghosts watching us. It's about soul connection responding to emotional frequency. Love, grief, longing. These are more than feelings. According to Cayce, they are spiritual energies, vibrations that transcend the physical world. And when those energies are strong, they seem to open a channel between this world and the next. So when you feel someone's presence, especially during times of deep emotional intensity, it may not be wishful thinking. It may be love reaching across the divide. At this point, maybe we need to shift the question. It's not really about whether the deceased are watching us, like silent spectators behind some invisible curtain. That's a bit too linear, too human, too limited. Maybe the deeper question is this: does the connection still exist in a different form? Maybe it's not a wall that separates the living and the dead. Maybe it's a window, a thin veil, one that sometimes shimmers open in moments of great emotion and then quietly closes again. And maybe, just maybe, the presence we feel isn't them observing us, but something more beautiful, a mutual vibration, a resonance, a recognition that the bond is still alive, just no longer physical. Love doesn't vanish. It transforms. Connection doesn't break. It shifts. The energy of someone we've loved doesn't disappear. It weaves itself into our memories, our decisions, our quiet moments. It shows up in dreams, in intuition, in tears we can't explain. So the real question is not, are they still watching? But rather, how are they still with us? And maybe that's the most profound takeaway. If our love is still felt, if our grief still reaches them, if our growth still echoes in the space between, then how we live truly matters. Every step we take in healing, every act of kindness, every time we choose love over fear, it may be witnessed in ways we can't fully understand. And that possibility alone adds a sacredness to life. You're not alone in wondering. Many of us have felt those unexplainable moments, that gentle presence, that sudden calm, that inexplicable sign. And if you have a story, share it. Let's open up the conversation. Because this isn't just about the afterlife. It's about how we choose to live this life, with heart, with awareness, and with a faith that love endures. If this resonated with you, join our community. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and keep asking the big questions with us. This journey of consciousness isn't one we have to walk alone.